Hey everyone, Giacometti Trades back here again with another video, and today we're going to be doing a full overview and review of the DJI Avata. Alright, so in this video I'm going to be breaking it up into a couple of parts. The first part is going to be the unboxing experience. The second part I'm going to be talking about my experience with the Avata, what I think about it, and giving you guys a recommendation on whether or not I think that it's worth it for you. The next component of this review is going to be a flight demo and just sort of video quality, showing off exactly what this thing is capable of and how it'll perform out in the field. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is going to be how, if you have any type of crash involving a loss of, like say if you're using ND filters or a UV filter, PL filter, anything like that, if you have a hard enough crash, in some cases, even if you put the filter on properly, it can pop off. So I will show you guys my method on retrieving those things if you lose them out in the field, since they can add up. If you lose them a bunch, I will be going over that. As well, I'll be showing you guys how to set up your FPV Controller 2 to work with the Avata in manual mode. So I'll show you exactly what you need to do to the sticks to make them ideal for manual flight. Finally, I'll also be going over some useful accessories and other things like that that you may want to pick up. And I'll finally wrap up by showing you guys the flight simulator, which is basically a really great tool that you can use with your phone, and the goggles to simulate flying the Avata in manual mode before you actually go ahead and commit to using this in manual. If you've only ever flown GPS drones, it can be very different. So I highly recommend you guys start out with the simulator first, so that way you don't wreck your DJI Avata before you really have a chance to enjoy it. But with that, let's get into the first part. Alright, so here we have the box that the DJI Avata comes in. I got the ProView combo, so that's the one that comes with the new goggles too. So I also went ahead and got the Fly More combo, which comes with 2 additional batteries. So one thing to note about the Avata is that when you purchase it, unless you get it without any controller whatsoever, you only have one controller option, which is the motion controller. So if you want to fly in manual mode, you are going to need to pick up a secondary controller, like the DJI FPV RC2. So first, taking a look at the drone, comes in a little bag here. And this is what it looks like. It's a little bit larger than I was expecting, but it's still fairly small and compact. Inside of the main box, you also get an adapter for charging your batteries, and you get a pair of spare propellers along with the screws and the tool that you need to replace them. And of course, you also get a USB-C cable, which can be used for charging. So now taking a look at the goggles too in the RC. Here we have the goggles themselves. And as you can see, this is what they look like. You have the lens cover, and then in this back compartment, we have all of the accessories. So this is going to be your battery for the goggles. This will be your headband. These are going to be your lens adapters in case you have prescription lenses that you'd like to get. You get a pair of these so you can easily mount them. So this is what they're going to look like. And here you also get your cable. So one end connects to the goggles and the other end connects to the battery. And here you get your OTG cable. So this is for connecting video output to your phone. And here are just your regular bucks. And finally in that section was also the motion controller. And now lastly, if you choose to also get the Fly More kit, this is the box that it will come in. And inside we'll get a strip which has ports for all of your batteries so that we can charge them all at once. This supports up to 4 batteries, so that's nice to have. And then here we get 2 of the batteries. These are all of the accessories that you get with this bundle. And of course, if you would like to have the Fly More combo, you can also get this little bit here separate, the multi-charger with the batteries. So this is everything that comes in the bundle. Now let's get on to the rest of this review. So here I'll be showing you guys the basic process of how you are going to set up your DJI Avata for flight. First off, you want to take your headset, turn it around, and make sure that you have an SD card in here so that way you have recording capability on the headset. This is really helpful for post-processing as well as if you lose contact with the drone. I don't know if this will be able to record the last moments if you don't have an SD card in, so I would definitely recommend having one in. But you want to take the included power cable here and plug it in to this port here. Then you want to take the OTG cable that's included and a regular USB-A to C or Lightning, or get yourself a USB-C to Lightning or USB-C to C cable and plug it in here. Make sure that it's a data cable, otherwise it won't work. Then just plug your phone in. You also want to take your goggles battery and plug it in. Make sure that it clicks in so that way it doesn't pull out. If you are going to be using this for a long time, I do suggest getting a strap for your battery for your goggles, or just using some Velcro like I have here. That will keep it in place, but since I'm not going to be putting this on right now, it's not an issue. Then just press once and double press and hold for this to power on. You'll hear a tone on the goggles themselves indicating that they're turning on. While we're doing that, we can also turn on our drone. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'll just use the motion controller. Then you just want to navigate on your phone to the DJI Fly app. And as long as everything is connected, you will see video output and basically a mirror of what you see on your goggles on your phone. Now, the first time that you do this, it's not going to work this way because I have this set up, it basically goes straight into it. But if you do have a situation where you are just starting this up for the first time, the app will actually walk you through the process of how to set it up. Just follow the instructions and you'll be okay. If you do have any issues with that though, you can leave a comment down below and I can help you, or you can click on the video that I'll have linked down below, which is directly from DJI that goes over the exact process that you need to do to get this set up for the first time. So here I'm going to be going over the settings inside of the goggles. So if you press on the lock button, it'll lock the screen so we don't make any changes. This is the exposure button. You can change how bright it is in your eyes. This is not something that will show up on video. You also have your screen brightness, and you have your volume sliders. If you swipe up from the bottom, this will bring up your camera controls. Right now, the drone is in low power mode and is not in flight, so I can't really mess with this stuff. But if it were on and primed, you would be able to change these settings to whatever you like. I have mine on manual. I usually shoot at 4K 60, so I have the shutter at 1/120. That gives proper motion blur for 60 FPS 4K video. I also have the descent-alike profile on. If you go here to status, that is your drone. You get to this menu by swiping forward on the panel. You also have your transmission options, so you have some things for the pilot and for an audience if you have other people that want to watch with goggles. Here we go into safety settings. You can set your max height, max distance, or return to home altitude. This also gives information on all of the calibrations and if they're okay or not. You have ESC beeping. If you turn that on, it will make the drone beep. You have the signal loss action, so if you lose signal, generally you want to leave this on return to home, but you could set it to land or to hover. Landing is probably the worst of the options unless you're indoors though. If you go here to the controller settings, you can change your custom mode to manual. That's how you would do it. Automatically from the factory, it's going to be set to sport. So if you do know how to fly in manual and you feel comfortable, change it. Go into gain and expo if you are also comfortable with flying manual and you want to be able to do flips and rolls. Make sure that this switch is turned off, and that will allow you to do that. Also, you can go here to the RC calibration. If there's any issues, you can calibrate the RC controller. For the gimbal pitch, you can have slow, medium, or fast. You can calibrate it. Also here, you can set your units to imperial or to metric. You can also do turtle mode from here, or you can set it as a control in the controller menu. That's what I have. You can also replay the tutorial for the goggles. Here we have the camera settings menu. This is a little bit less convenient than the swipe up menu, but you can go here to toggle some more in-depth settings if you would like to do that. You also have grid lines. I don't fly with those usually in FPV because I want to make sure that what I'm seeing is what I'm actually seeing. But I do have the center point on. What that does is it puts a little crosshair in the middle of your screen so that you know exactly where you're flying. That can be pretty helpful if you're doing gaps and other things like that. It just kind of keeps you centered. Down here we have display. You can change the brightness in here as well. You can change the scaling. As far as my impressions of the DJI Avata, I think that this is a pretty fantastic drone. It is so much fun. I've pretty much been flying it every single day for the past week and a half, and it's really held up well. I mean, I've flown it in minus 10-degree weather, and even with the very, very low temperatures and high wind chill, the battery life still didn't really suffer too much. You're still getting right around 20 minutes if you're using your normal mode. If you're using sport mode, it'll maybe go down to like 15, 18 minutes. And if you are flying in manual mode and you're really doing some aggressive flying, the battery life can suffer quite a bit. So even if you're not flying in cold, the battery life can still suffer if you're flying in manual mode and you're really pushing it. Generally speaking, if you're flying in manual, you'll get probably about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Like I said, depending on how you fly. If you're flying more conserved, though, you can expect right around the 12 to 13 minute mark. But overall, I think it's pretty good. A lot of people have sort of complained about the battery life, but from my research and experience just talking to people who actually fly FPV, you really can't complain too much about the battery life, since your typical home-built FPV drone you'll maybe get like 10 minutes out of it. So being able to flip this into manual or sport mode and get up to 20 minutes, I think that's great. As far as durability of this thing, it's pretty good. I have crashed this thing several times into things like trees, pavement. I've even hit, I think, maybe like a rock with it. The drone itself really has no major damage. There's just a little bit of a burr here in the plastic and a little bit of scraping over here on the side here. But what's nice is that DJI does actually sell the upper frame as well as the lower frame with the ducks on their website. So if you do break any of that, you can just go to DJI and order a brand new one. I'll even throw a link down in the description for another website that I found that will actually sell you parts that DJI won't sell, like this top cover here for the GPS module. One crash that I was in, there was uneven ground and it put a lot of force onto this piece and cracked it. So some of the components in here were exposed for a little bit, and I contacted DJI. They wouldn't sell me this piece by itself, so I found another website that will actually sell this part. And in addition to this, they'll sell the entire GPS module to you. Obviously, you need to know how to replace such things, but it's nice to see that there are third parties out there that will sell you pieces of this drone. That way you can do all of the replacements yourself if you are qualified to do so. Overall, like I said, I think the durability is pretty good. Even the propellers, if you hit them into things, they will get a little bit chopped up, but they'll still function properly. I haven't really seen any wobbling or instability in flight. If you do break a prop though, I would definitely recommend replacing it, but if it's just normal wear and tear, like you're seeing a little bit of chipping or something like that, it's not the end of the world. This thing is pretty resilient, so that is good to see. On the topic of crashing though, one thing that I highly recommend you guys do is get yourself a battery strap or some way of keeping the battery in. I haven't had this experience because I've been flying with a battery strap from day one, but some people have mentioned that if you have a hard enough impact, the battery can actually pop out of the back, which is okay, but if you end up losing video and you end up losing audio, that can be a bit of a problem as far as finding it. The goggles do have a feature which allows you to replay the last moments that you were with your drone. So if you do lose signal, you can go into the goggles and replay the last moments that it was recording, and that can help you to locate it. But if you still can't locate it, there is ESC beeping on this, and if the battery comes unplugged for some reason, the ESC beeping will not work. Another thing that's really nice that DJI included in a recent firmware update is the ability to shoot in 4K at 30 FPS. So previously you could shoot at 4K at 60 and 4K at 50, but now you can also shoot at 4K 30. If you do shoot at 4K 30 in the goggles, just note that it will be a little bit more blurry, a little bit more choppy because you're shooting at a lower frame rate. So be prepared for that. Don't be doing anything too crazy as far as you're flying, because you're going to have a lower frame rate. It may be a little bit harder to see some things, but it does give you that really nice smooth motion blur as long as you have your shutter speed set properly. And especially if you're going to be shooting at 4K 30, ND filters are a must if you're shooting in the daytime, because it gets really bright and you have to have your shutter speed at 1/60 to have proper motion blur. And if you do that, your image will be super overexposed. So you'll definitely want to have at least an ND16 to kind of bring down that brightness. Speaking of the video, the other thing that's really nice about this is that, like the DJI Mini 3 Pro, this has the Cine-like on board. So that is DJI's sort of flat color profile, which allows you to get nice contrast and high dynamic range with 10-bit color out of this drone. And although it will look pretty bland once you get it directly out of the drone, after you color grade it, all of the colors really pop. You can really play around with it a lot more than you can just the standard profile. But if you're not into color grading or anything like that, you can also just shoot in the standard profile, which looks pretty good. Additionally, about the video, this has two forms of stabilization built in. So you have Rocksteady, which is DJI's proprietary stabilization software, which will be applied automatically to your video if you have it turned on. You also have Horizon Steady, which is another DJI thing. Basically, if you are rolling all over the place and your drone is maybe flipping or doing other things like that, instead of capturing all of those motions, Horizon Steady will basically erase all of that and lock your horizon. And then, of course, you can turn all of that off. And that's generally what I do. I use a third-party piece of software called GyroFlow, which I will leave a link to down in the description. And this can be used to import all of the gyro data that your drone records alongside the video. And that will basically stabilize your video exactly how you want it. So one of the other components of the ProView combo, which is what I got, is the DJI Goggles 2. So these are not to be confused with the DJI Goggles V2. Their naming scheme is a little bit confusing, but these are the newest version of the goggles that DJI sells. And these things actually blew me away. But first, I will talk about something that I don't like so much, which is the foam padding around the head piece here. I find that it's okay as far as keeping the light contained. Even if I'm out on a sunny day, I don't really have any problems with light leak, but there are some people who have had problems, so just be aware of that. But my main problem with this headband is that, especially if you're indoors using the drone or you're using the simulator for a long period of time, this does get pretty warm and pretty hot, so I'm not really a fan of that. Some people have also complained about the lenses fogging up, but I haven't had any problems with that. But it is something to note since a lot of people have made complaints. Speaking about some of the things that I really like about these, the lenses are pretty amazing. These actually have built-in diopters, which go from -8 to +2. And I'm actually really impressed because my prescription is pretty strong. And before I got custom lenses made for this to correct for astigmatism, I was just using these and I could see everything clearly, which is really nice to have with a VR headset like this, because most companies don't do things like that. And so if you have glasses and your glasses won't fit in here, you're kind of out of luck. With this, it's so nice that you actually have these diopters built in so you can get the high quality image that you want to get out of these. The other thing that's nice is that you have IPD adjustments. So in addition to getting your prescription set in, you can also change the distance that these are from one another. Additionally, for those goggles, I picked up a pair of lenses from Hans VR, which I will leave a link to down in the description, along with everything else that I talk about in this video. And these are really nice because they're a pretty affordable option. They shipped pretty fast and they are my exact prescription, so I can just leave the diopters on 0, set the IPD, pop these in, and I will be up and flying with perfect clarity. Like I said, I do have an astigmatism, and if you have that as well, peripheral vision will be a little bit blurred if you're just using the built-in diopters. But if you use these with your exact prescription, that will fix all of that. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the motion controller. So here's the motion controller. But basically, this is a great way for people who have never flown before to get into the hobby. If you have a parent or somebody else that you want to sort of show this to and you want them to experience it, this is a really good way to go because it's super simple. It's really easy, in my experience, to show somebody basically how to use it, which is just tilting left, tilting right, up and down, and then using this trigger to go forward. And it's also got a huge pause button, so really anybody can fly using this. I don't think for a lot of people this is what they were hoping for. I feel like DJI could have done a little bit better by including a bundle that had the RC controller too, instead of just this motion controller, there are no bundles that come with the RC, so you are going to get this if you get the Avata regardless. And even though I think it's kind of annoying, it's a thing that's nice to have. I mean, I'm not going to use it all the time, but it can come in handy. And the other thing that's nice about this is it enables the head tracking feature on the goggles too. So if you do want to look around from up in the sky, you can really only do that if you're using the motion controller. So that's kind of a reason that you may want to use this. All right, so speaking of the RC controller, I have it right here. And I have a little lanyard put on so that way I can wear this around my neck and keep it where it should be, so that way my flight can be a little bit more stable. This controller works perfectly. It's exactly what you would expect, just a standard sort of controller. All right, so with all of that in mind, what do I think about the Avata? Do I think that it is worth it? Honestly, I think that this is a drone that is completely worth it if you are willing to put up with a couple of things. The first thing to note is that this drone does weigh over 250 grams. So if you're in the United States, at least, you will have to register this with the FAA. It's not a complicated process, but it does cost you $5, and you'll have to put your FAA tracking number on the top of it, just so that way it is a registered aircraft. The other thing to note about the Avata is that it is a bit of a more advanced drone. So if you're just getting into the hobby, I would probably start out with a different style of drone, maybe one of the mini series or a Mavic, since those are GPS drones. They will just hover in place entirely. There's no possibility of flying them around and doing flips and tricks and other things like that. Plus they also have the 3-axis stabilized gimbal, which if you're going to be doing professional work and you don't fully understand how drones work, it'll be a lot easier for you to get started with a Mavic or a Mini than it will be for this. But if you do have some experience under your belt, I think this is an excellent option, and it gives you something totally different to work with than you might be used to. So I think it's a pretty great investment, especially if you're going to be doing any type of professional work. Not a lot of people can fly FPV, so if you can and you learn to do it pretty well, there are definitely a lot of jobs out there for you to take on. As far as serviceability, the other thing that's nice is that DJI sells a lot of components themselves. Like I said, there's also another website that I'll link down below that you can buy parts that DJI won't sell you directly. So you can service this yourself, which is pretty nice. Some of the parts can be a little bit expensive, but overall it's better than buying a brand new drone if you don't have the care refresh. Overall, I think the Avata is a pretty great drone. It's by far the most fun that I've had flying a drone. There's nothing that really comes close to being in the cockpit, so to speak. Being able to see out the front as the drone's flying in a headset, I think that's really, really cool. It gives you a new perspective, and it's really fun, especially if you're pretty low down to the ground. You know, you really get a sense of speed and motion, so I think it's pretty cool. So here I am flying in the normal mode, and now here I switch it into sport mode. As you can see, this is what you will see if you have the goggles on, minus the center point and some other features. But you see the speed and all of that. Here I am flying in manual mode underneath some branches in the woods. The nice thing about this drone is that it's so small that it can really fit into a lot of places, and with the propeller guards and other features, this is a pretty safe drone to fly, even if you are flying in a place like that. Here I am flying very low to the ground. You can see tons of motion blur, which is really nice to see. This was shot at 4K 30 FPS, and it's really a pretty sunny day, so I had an ND filter on. This was also stabilized using GyroFlow and color graded using DaVinci Resolve. Again, I'll leave links to those in the description. Alright, so one thing that you also want to be very aware of when you're using the goggles too is that the lenses should never be exposed directly to the sun. If you do that, you can actually end up ruining the screens on the inside. These are OLED panels, and if the sun gets focused on them by the diopters here, it could cause some deformation of the panel, so that's a bad thing. One other thing to note is that these are OLED, like I said, so screen burn-in could be an issue. There is a little sensor here which will tell if the goggles are on your face or not, so definitely don't obstruct this, so that way when you take these off, if they're still on, the goggles will turn off. So that's just another thing to be aware of. Now, showing you guys around, on the bottom you have an SD card slot. So I have a 128 gigabyte SD card in there. Right above here we have a headphone jack. These do have built-in speakers, but if you want to use headphones, that is an option. Here you also have your power input. So it's just a traditional barrel plug. Here is your USB-C cable, which you can connect your phone directly to using a USB-C to Lightning or USB-C to USB-C data cable, depending on what your phone supports. On the right side here, you also have a touch surface. This is for navigating the controls. And on the top, we have our antennas, which just flip up and down. And then you have some venting. These are fan cooled. So if you are a person with a prescription and you want to change the strength of the correction here, all you have to do is just push up and twist to the left. That will unlock the lens right here. And now we can change the diopter setting. So you can go all the way down to -8 or all the way up to +2. And you can also change how far away the spacing is, left or right. And if, like me, you have custom lenses made for you, you can also put those right here. So just line it up at the top, make sure that it is at the 0 mark, so that way you don't have any corrections being applied from the diopters. And that's how it's going to look with your custom lenses in place. So this is my Avata as it sits right now. Don't mind the scratches up here. This is after flying for a little bit and I had bumped it into a couple of things. But first off, when you're going to fly, you want to make sure that you remove this gimbal cover here, because the gimbal needs to be able to move freely when it starts up. Otherwise, you'll have an error that shows up and you'll be stressing your motor out, so that's not a good thing. You want to make sure that it's free to move around. Moving around to the back here, you'll see that I have this Velcro strap on. This keeps the battery from coming out if there's ever a hard crash. You definitely want to make sure that you have something like this in place. The way that I have it set up is going right through this hole here, and it sort of wraps around the base of the GPS module. You could also try to put it through this part of the frame here, but it will increase the distance that it has to travel, and that's a little bit difficult to get a good seal around here. So I have it set up this way, but if you have a 3D printed model or some other type of thing, that may work a little bit better for you, but this is just what I found to work pretty well. So another thing that is important to know is how you turn this on. So I will just remove my cover a little bit. You can still turn this on with the battery holder in place, but just to show you a little bit more clearly, if you want to turn the drone on, this is the power button. You just press it once and then press and hold. The lights will blink in sequence, and it'll make a little chime, motors will start turning, and you'll be ready to go once you connect the goggles and the iPhone together. Once you connect the goggles and your phone together and you have a controller paired up. All right, so now taking a look at the motion controller. On the front here, we have a trigger. This is for acceleration. This will make you go forward. You have just some bolts here on the front. On the top here, we have the 3 indicator lights for our battery. If you press the power once, it will just light those up for you. You also have your connection light. Here we have the lock button, so this is for starting, stopping the propellers, and taking off. You also have your mode selector down here. This will only support your normal and sport mode flying, so you can't do manual with this. Here we have the brake button, so if you're flying and you encounter some sort of problem mid-flight, just press this and it will stop your drone where it's at. If you want to turn the controller on, just press short and then press long. You'll hear a chime and it will connect. Here we have our tilt for the gimbal, so you can tilt up or down. And then you have your start and stop recording button or your shutter button. This also has a lanyard built in, so that way you don't drop this accidentally. All right, so this is the RC Controller 2. There is a place for both of the sticks down here, so if you are storing this and you don't have a case like I do, you can unscrew these sticks and stick them into the controller base here and here. You also have your power button, so as with all DJI products, if you just tap this once and then press and hold, it'll turn on, and then if you do the same, it turns off. You have your C1 button. This can be customized in a couple of ways. So you have a single press functionality and a double press functionality. You have your throttle control if you're in manual mode on the left, or your elevation. You have your yaw left and right. Regardless of mode, that's what that is. Here, if you're in normal or sport mode, you have forward, back, left, and right. And if you are flying in manual mode, this is going to be your pitch and your roll. Up here on the top, we have a flip-up antenna. Always have this up so that we get the best signal. You have a little dial which controls your gimbal, so you can tilt the gimbal up or down using this. You also have your pause button / return to home. Make sure to use that if you ever get into a pinch. You also have your mode selector, so normal, sport, manual, and remember that manual you need to enable manually in the goggles before actually using. And then on the right side we have the multifunction button, which you can remap to do different functions, but by default it's camera up, camera center, and camera down. You also have your start and stop record button and your start and stop propeller button. Be sure that if you're using manual mode to only use this when you're absolutely sure that your drone will be safe, because it will shut off the propellers and your drone could fall out of the sky if you do that. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the only real problem that I've ever had with this whole bundle is the RC Controller 2. I don't know if this is an issue that everybody is having, so if you do have one of these, let me know if it's happening to you too. But if I take a USB-C to USB-C cable and plug it in, it doesn't matter how much wattage it's putting out. This one right here is putting out 65 watts and it is not charging. I can also change it to a lower wattage port here. Now it's outputting right around 22 watts or 20 watts thereabouts, and it's still not charging. But if I plug it in using a USB-A to USB-C cable, it begins charging straight away. So I don't know if it's just me that's having this problem or if it's everybody, but If you are having this issue, please let me know in the comments below, since I think it's kind of weird. None of my other DJI controllers care if you're using a USB-C or a USB-A to C cable, but this one does. So that's something that I wanted to note. So here I'm just going to show you guys what you need to do to get your RC controller 2 in condition for flying manual. You just want to tighten up F2, which is this right hole, until your stick is nice and wiggly. Then go to F1 and tighten it slowly until you see the tension rise to the point where you don't have any more wiggling and your stick will just stay where you put it without returning back to the center or without wiggling around and losing its position. Alright, so this is the set of filters that I would recommend you guys to get. This is from Freewell. It comes with a PL filter, a UV filter, and a set of 4 ND filters. These are really great if you are going to be flying, and especially if you're going to be shooting at 4K 30 FPS. You definitely need to get the ND filters, but the PL filter can be nice if you're flying over water or other things that have reflections. That'll cut down on some of that. The other thing that is really good is flying around with a UV filter. If you do fly around a lot with the Avata and you're trying to do tricks or other things like that, you definitely want to make sure that you protect your lens, and this is a really good way of doing that. It basically just gives you another layer of glass that you have in front of your lens, so that way you don't end up ruining it. Like I said, the ND filters are really great, especially if you're going to be shooting at 4K 30 FPS, since your shutter speed to get proper motion blur is going to have to be 1/60. That'll let a lot of light in, and so if you are doing that, you would definitely want to put on an ND filter. That'll bring down the brightness of the scene, so that way you have proper exposure for that shutter speed. Alright, so here I wanted to show you guys exactly how you put on a filter to the DJI Avata. It is really simple. In some ways simple to a fault. I have had these filters fall off a couple of times even when they're properly installed, but they're only ever going to fall off if you have a major impact or something sort of pries it off. But just do be aware that they can fall off. And I will be showing you guys in a later part of this video exactly how I get them back if I do lose them. I've had decent success with it, so I'll show you my method and talk through it a little bit. But to get them on, all you need to do is just open up your case. Here I have a PL filter and a PL filter and a UV filter. So we'll just remove the UV filter. You want to make sure that the inside is perfectly clean. As well, you want to make sure that the lens itself is clean and free of debris. And then all you want to do is just hold it sideways or whatever is most comfortable for you. And then just take your UV filter and put it on here and snap it into place. You'll know that it's a good fit if you hear a little click or a little snap sound. And now our filter is installed, but there's fingerprints on, so you just want to take a cleaning cloth here, hold on to the camera a little bit so that it's not bobbling around, and then just give it a nice wipe down. And now the filter is clean and ready for use. Alright, so the last thing that I want to show off is my case that I got. This case is from Skyreat on Amazon. I will leave a link again in the description. So it has slots for your single battery charger. If you don't choose to get the Fly More combo, that's what you're going to have. You also have a slot for your headset battery. If you do get the Fly More combo, you have a spot for the multi-battery charger as well. I put the little Allen wrench here, so that way if I have to do a repair while I'm out, I have that right here. You also have slots for 4 batteries. Since I only have 3 and one of them stays in the drone, I have the 2 here. And then we have the lenses from Hans VR. I also have some other cleaning cloths and a little 90-degree USB-C adapter, which I will also throw in the description because the slot where the USB-C is to get all of your data off of the Avata is right in between the propellers, and it's a pain to get to. So yeah, I will leave that in the description. Just to show you guys here, the SD card and the USB-C for the Avata are right in here. So here is the USB-C and the SD card is right there. So it is a little bit difficult to get in there. So I would highly recommend picking up a right angle USB-C adapter that I have linked in the description, and that will help you out a little bit. So in here, we can also put the cables that the Avata came in. So we can put them right there, and then put the Avata itself facing upside down in there. We have a spot for the motion controller, so if you want to take that with you, that is there. We also have a slot for the goggles too, and the cable. If you have a RC controller too, you can also stick that in here. What's nice with this case is that you don't even need to remove... Oh, come on. So if you have an RC controller too, like I have, you can also stick that in here. So you don't even have to remove the control sticks, which is nice. And you can keep your lanyard on as well if you have one. And so you can just put that all up and in there. And unfortunately, the only downside that I have about this case is that there's no storage for miscellaneous items. And things like the propellers are very oddly shaped and they don't really fit in places very well. So if you are going to be taking the motion controller, you can't put them in there, obviously. What I found as being the best place to put them is right behind the controller here. So you can put one there and then one facing like that. Unfortunately, there's not really much more space, so that is a little bit unfortunate, but then you can just close this up on the top, and this has a nice little claw mechanism with spring-loaded latches here. So there we go. So as I had mentioned a little bit earlier on in the video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how I find a filter if it gets lost during a flight. So this, of course, only works if you are recording at the time, so do make sure that you are recording every time you go to take this thing out in case anything bad does happen. As a note, I will also be highlighting all of the filters in this case that do fall off of the drone in red, so that way you can clearly see where they are and figure out what I did to find them. What you want to do is import your footage to your computer, go into some editing software, and slow it right down, or just take a look frame by frame. And what you're looking for is just a very small object that flies off of the drone, and as long as you have some frame of reference as to where you are, or rather where the drone was when this occurred, you can sort of pinpoint exactly where the object might have gone, and that'll really help you out. So especially here, this is a very easy one to see because there's harsh shadows. The filter pops off right about here, and you can see a little shadow appear. Then all you need to do is just infer where the object could be, and hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to find it after you look at the video. For me, it was pretty straightforward just after thinking it out a little bit. Alright, so finally I wanted to show you guys how you use the simulator. So right now I am in it, but if you want to get to it, all you would need to do is to just put on your goggles as normal, power them up, then go to the three dots menu down here, select the flight companion. That will put your goggles into pairing mode. Then you can just go ahead and connect your phone and controller normally. Now that we're inside of the app, we can change our settings. So if you have any preferences that are non-standard for your control method, you can do that. You can also adjust your expo, so any of those settings. And you can also choose your drone. So we're flying in Avata, so we'll choose that. And so you can see here I'm flying in manual mode. I don't have the goggles on right now, so my flying is a little bit choppy and not so good, but you kind of get the idea. Basically, this can be used for any type of simulation, if you're trying out new tricks or you want to learn something new, or even if you just want to learn manual mode from the ground up, this is a great place to do it because it's going to be consequence-free and it will be using the experience of your own drone, basically. So definitely do that. But that has been the review of the Avata. I hope you guys found that helpful. If you did, feel free to leave a like, drop a comment down below, and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys in the next video.